love, there are choices. But what happens when your choice leaves another life in ruins? Daniel thought he could have it all: a family, a career, and a love he could never admit. But his secret cost him everything. And now his daughter Amara is here to confront the past he thought he left behind. A tale of forbidden love, unspoken truths, and the daughter caught in the middle.
If someone told me a month ago that my life was built on a secret, I would have laughed. My mother, Lillian, was the most straightforward person I knew, or at least that's what I believe. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. It all started with her passing. Losing her was devastating enough, but what I uncovered afterward shattered everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. 2 weeks after the funeral, I found myself sitting on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by her things. I was sorting through clothes, photographs and trinkets, feeling the weight of her absence in every corner of the room. That's when I found it. A worn, leather-bound journal hidden at the back of her closet. My heart raced as I opened it, the scent of aged paper hitting me like a wave of nostalgia and mystery. At first, the entries were mundane. Reflections on her day, thoughts about raising me as a single mother, and her quiet pride in my accomplishments. But as I read further, her words took a darker turn. She wrote about a man, my father. She described him as charismatic, kind, and full of potential. But then came the bombshell. She left him, not because he was abusive or unkind, but because of something she could never forgive. I sat there for hours, flipping through the pages, trying to piece together the fragments of her story. She wrote about the betrayal, the heartbreak, and her decision to leave her life behind to protect herself and me. But nowhere did she explain why. The entries stopped abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers. I couldn't let it go. The journal consumed my thoughts. Who was my father? What had he done to make my mother leave? I needed answers, and I knew where to start: her hometown. I packed a bag and drove to the small village where my mother had grown up, a place she rarely spoke about. As I arrived, I felt like an outsider in a world she had left behind. The first person I met was Miriam, my mother's childhood friend. She was in her 80s, her hands weathered from years of working in the fields, but her eyes were sharp and kind. When I mentioned my mother, a bittersweet smile spread across her face. She was always a strong one, Miriam said, pouring tea into delicate china cups, but she carried secrets like stones in her heart. I showed her the journal, and her expression darkened. Miriam admitted that she didn't know why my mother had left or what had happened between her and my father. All I know, she said, is that your mother loved you fiercely. Whatever she did it for you. Miriam gave me the first real clue I needed. My father's name, Daniel Hart. A man who had once been a rising star in the community before disappearing into the city. Armed with this information, I knew what I had to do next. Finding Daniel wasn't hard. He was a successful businessman, his name attached to a prominent law firm. I made an appointment under a fake name, posing as someone interested in his services. When I arrived at his office, my nerves were electric. This was the man who had unknowingly shaped my life, and he had no idea who I was. Daniel greeted me warmly, his handshake firm. He looked nothing like I'd imagined. Greying hair, glasses perched on his nose, and a calm demeanour that belied the storm inside me. We talked about legal matters for a few minutes, but my heart pounded as I tried to steer the conversation toward his personal life. So, I said casually, do you have a family? Children, perhaps? His face softened. No, not anymore. I never married. My life took a different path. Something in his tone told me there was more to the story, but I couldn't hold back any longer. Daniel, I said, my voice trembling, I'm not here for legal advice. I'm here because I'm your daughter. The room fell silent. His eyes widened, and for a moment he looked like he'd seen a ghost. What did you say? He whispered. I'm your daughter. Lillian was my mother. Daniel sat back, his hands trembling slightly as he removed his glasses. Lillian, he said, his voice barely audible. I loved your mother more than anything, but I made a mistake that cost me everything. He took a deep breath and began to tell me the story. He and my mother had been deeply in love, planning a future together, but during her pregnancy, another man entered his life, a man named Thomas. Daniel realized that his feelings for Thomas were unlike anything he had ever experienced. For the first time, he confronted the truth about his own identity. I told Lillian, he said, his voice cracking. I thought I owed her that much, but she was devastated. She didn't want to raise you in a broken home, and she didn't want to stay and watch me struggle with my feelings, so she left. I didn't know she was pregnant. She never told me. Tears filled my eyes as I listened. My mother had left everything she knew because of a love that couldn't be reciprocated in the way she needed. She had raised me alone, carrying the weight of a heartbreak she never shared. I've spent years wondering what happened to her, Daniel continued. I tried to find her, but it was like she vanished. And now you're here. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Daniel and I talked for hours, filling in the gaps of each other's lives. He showed me pictures of his younger self and told me about his relationship with Thomas, which ended years ago. Despite his regrets, there was a gentleness in his words, a deep love for my mother that had never faded. As I drove home, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for the pain my mother endured, anger at the circumstances, and a strange sense of peace. My mother had made sacrifices to protect me, but she had also kept me from knowing a father who might have loved me in his own way. In the weeks that followed, I began to heal. I kept my mother's journal close, a reminder of her strength and love. And while I would never fully understand her choices, I knew she had done what she thought was best. Daniel and I stayed in touch, slowly building a relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And as I pieced together the fragments of my family's story, I realized something important. The past doesn't have to define the future. We all carry secrets, but it's how we face them that shapes who we are. Looking back, I see my mother's journal as a gift. It was her way of telling me the truth, even if she couldn't do it in person. Her love, her sacrifice, and her resilience live on in me. And now, with both her and my father's stories in my heart, I can finally move forward, stronger, wiser, and more at peace than ever before. Thank you for joining Jum's journey and experiencing the power of acceptance and resilience with us. If you found her story inspiring, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for more captivating tales ahead. Until next time, farewell.